about that, and this can be done through education, as well as formal one and as well as non-formal one. Both work together, work hand in hand here, and probably should be brought closer together in the near future. If we compare an uneducated person with an educated one, what do we see? We normally see more tolerance in an educated person. We see that an educated person is nearly always more apt to friendship, to dialogue, to finding common ground in any kind of fields, any kind of issues that come forward. And probably the most important point here is that normally an educated person is more open for different ideas, and is also able to adopt his or her activities and views to the changing world, to the rapidly changing current globalizing environment. An uneducated person is normally less tolerant, is not that apt to change his or her mind in any kind of fundamental issues, and is not that easily able to adopt his or her activities and views. What about knowledge? The aim of knowledge pursuit spelled out here is actually the one presented and advocated by the Hizmet movement. It is shedding light on the mysteries of human nature and enlightening the dark areas of existence. Probably it is put here a bit too metaphysically or too generally, and therefore now in the closing part of my talk I would like to make an attempt of connecting the basic ideas of the Hizmet movement, first of all, the leader Fethullah Gülen, with some ideas that have been brought forward recently in the philosophy of science, which is my own field. And I am going to deal with this issue based on the views of a British philosopher of science, Nicholas Maxwell, who has come forward with very interesting ideas concerning science and the whole academia, also higher education, trying to reorientate it just in the mood, in the spirit of serving the humanity. Let me start by telling you one true story about a talk Nicholas Maxwell gave at a conference. In this talk, he quoted actually the words of Mahatma Gandhi. Mahatma Gandhi was brought to London by the British once, and he was showed around in London with a purpose to explain him and to show him directly that the Western civilization has really big achievements. There are tall buildings and nice lights and businesses and theaters and shops, and everything looks bright and nice. And after being there for a while with Mahatma Gandhi, his guides asked him, "What do you think about the Western civilization?" And what would you think? What was the reply of Mr. Gandhi? His reply was, that would be a good idea. So he did not consider that he had been shown anything that concerns civilization in any way. Of course, things are not that bad, really, I believe, and I think we all believe, but this example shows that what we see from the West, the people from other parts of the world may see quite differently, and we should really not be promoting too strongly our own vision, our own view of worldly matters. This can be quite one-sided, quite narrow-minded. Well, but now what is really the essence of the conception of Nicholas Maxwell? I would briefly like to address. Maxwell is analyzing first the so-called standard empiricism. By standard empiricism, he actually means the current scientific research, how currently scientific research is being done in the academia. I am not going to give you the details of the scientific method because you all know about it, at least in general terms, but the idea of Maxwell here is that by his view, the approach of scientists is too narrow. There is a glorification of empirical facts, and normally generalizations are made based on strict facts. And of course, we can find out many things, develop many new causal connections in the world using this method that can be very useful concerning solving some technological issues, or even healthcare problems, finding out better medicines, improve medical treatment, and so on and so forth. But this method by no means can anyhow make an impact on our general world view and make us any kind of better persons in that way. What does Maxwell suggest in replacement? First of all, his suggestion is to move towards aim-oriented empiricism, where already a general, we might say metaphysical aims are being brought forward, what should be the general goal of scientific research. This is not there currently in the academia, according to Maxwell. And on from there, we need to get to aim-oriented, or reach for an aim-oriented rationalism. Aim-oriented rationalism is already a worldview that includes the values, that includes the worldview as such, includes the approach to global problems, global matters, that should really actually be the most important issue the most educated people should address. Again, Maxwell feels that this is not that has been done in the academia so far, or at least it has not been stressed too much or stressed enough. And last but not least, in his last book, which has a somewhat strange title, Cutting God in Half. Unfortunately, I have no time to comment on this title anymore. Actually, the idea is to cut the God in half, but put the halves together again in a better way. Of course, it is a metaphor. No one believes, I think, that a real surgical operation can be done on God. This is a big metaphor and a quite influential one in the philosophy of science today. Okay, but in this book, Nicholas Maxwell advocates a change from knowledge inquiry to wisdom inquiry. What is knowledge inquiry? Again, this is what is being done in the academia today. We are looking for knowledge, or rather we are looking for pieces of knowledge. And we are not efficient enough in putting these pieces together. Or if we can even manage with this, put the pieces of knowledge together, somehow create some kind of mosaic, they still are just pieces of some details of our contemporary society, and there is no real picture of a whole world. And what is the real reason why science has been developing in such a way? This is the fact that the ideal science, the ideal of all scientific research and of all knowledge inquiry so far has been physics. There is nothing wrong with physics. Physics is physics. If we do physics properly, we can find out very interesting connections in the world. But physics is definitely not enough. And physics can by no means help us solve any kind of global problems, even if they are partly concerned with some matters that physics can deal with. Physics deals just with causal connections, but cannot touch the human culture, ideologies, religion, emotions, ethics, aesthetics, and so on and so forth. Therefore, Nicholas Maxwell has started to advocate a revolutionary change in the foundations of methodology of science, namely replacing physics as a foundation with the humanities. His idea is that it is the humanities that should really lay in the foundation, at the foundation of all knowledge, either scientific, maybe partly also non-scientific, and if we build our knowledge and our attitude to the whole world on the humanities and manage to develop them and include natural science, including physics and, of course, mathematics, astronomy, everything that has been there all the time, into this picture that is based on the humanities or centered around the humanities, then we can have a much brighter future, a future which is based on a dialogue. Being critical somewhat, as philosophers, fortunately or unfortunately, always tend to be, I must still say that Nicholas Maxwell so far has not been able to show any definite path or definite way, definite method, how to make this revolution to happen, how to make this big change in the foundations of knowledge. But here is a point where I see that the ideas of the Hizmet movement, the ideas of Fethullah Gülen, and some quite well-known, quite central, novel ideas in the academic philosophy have come quite close together. Well, if I'm wrong about that, the next speakers can criticize me. But this is my view, and I really think, together with Nicholas Maxwell, that we are currently in the need for a new enlightenment and a new era where academic thinking, and of course not only academic thinking, becomes more broad, more open, more tolerant, and that's really one way how we can develop dialogue concerning the future of civilization and stop thinking about clash, and hopefully any great clash will never happen. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you. Now we will have a break, and besides coffee and tea, we will serve also Turkish traditional sweet soup called ashure. And about this will talk one of our speakers, Ümit Göker.
There is not much I need to say. I think there is going to be a brochure that have information. But one idea that the Ashura food for me resembles or symbolizes is that despite our genuine differences, while preserving our identities and differences, we can come together and work for our common goals and fight together against our common enemies. Here you will have different ingredients, they preserve their identities, but coming together they offer a new taste. So that simple idea comes to mind whenever I eat Ashura. That is the only thing I can share with you in relation to this service.
And please welcome. We continue now. And now will speak Director of the Jesuit Secretariat for Interreligious Dialogue in Rome, Professor at Georgetown University, Professor Thomas Michel. Sorry. Now will speak Ümit Göker. Yes, sorry.
Dear guests, I'm so pleased to be here to be part of this occasion. To speak in front of such distinguished guests is quite challenging, though. I'll try to do my best. I'm also honored to share the stage with Dr. Michel. He's someone I deeply respect. And also his scholarship is something admirable. If I make mistakes during the course of my speech, I'm hopeful that he will provide some scholarly corrections. Speaking of the Huntington in your speech, that reminded me of that in 2009, if I'm not mistaken, he passed away. And we organized, I used to be in Atlanta at the time, and we organized a conference titled Alliance of Civilizations, and we entertained the idea of inviting him to the conference and forming a special panel for him. Then at the end, we decided not to. But interesting, if my memory is not failing me right now, it is 2 weeks or 2 months before the conference was held, he passed away. I read the sad news on the paper. Of course, there are many things that you do disagree with in the book, but still it's a very enjoyable read. As the title of my talk suggests, which is what is the Gülen movement and whether a new approach to education, we are going to talk about a movement, a civic movement, as it is phrased in the title, Gülen movement. The movement here is named after a person, Gülen. Gülen is last name of a famous Turkish Muslim scholar, Fethullah Gülen. And naming the movement as such has its own problems, particularly in the side of him, the Fethullah Gülen, the inspirer of the movement. He doesn't want to be given a central role in all this. He states that associating the movement or the work that is being done to his name is disrespect or insult to all those people, numerous numbers of people who sacrifice so much to make things happen. He says, people trusted me and I considered that trust as a capital and used to encourage them to do something good for the betterment of the immediate community and for the larger community and the whole humanity in general. I'll come back to this in the course of my talk, but in order to have an idea about the movement, I think it is best to know some about Gülen. So let me start with talking about Gülen first. A sociologist, Joshua Hendrick, if I don't misremember the name, said once, "What kind of man is this? He says a word in Istanbul and it turns into a school in Africa." Fethullah Gülen, some call it Fethullah Gülen Hoca Efendi. Hoca Efendi is a title of respect for men of knowledge or position. Is a well-known Turkish Muslim scholar, philosopher, author, poet, educational activist, and preacher emeritus. He was born in Erzurum city, Turkey, in 1938. He was known for his simple lifestyle. His mother taught him how to recite the Quran when he was 4, and his father, Ramiz Gülen, was an imam. He gave his first sermon when he was 14. Gülen officially became a state licensed preacher in 1989. In 1966, Gülen was transferred to a post in Izmir, a city in the western part of country. And it was here that Gülen's interests in education, science, the economy, and social justice began to come together, and a base of volunteer participants began to expand. He traveled around the cities in Anatolia and gave sermons in mosques, at town meetings, and in coffee houses, among other places. From Izmir on, he gave a special emphasis to promulgating his ideas to high school and college students. Gülen is regarded as the initiator and an inspiration for the worldwide social movement dedicated to a set of human values known as the Hizmet movement. Hizmet means service here, or the Gülen movement, as it is still used and in circulation in academic circles. He is taught by his audience to be a living model of one possessing the higher values, wisdom, faith, love, passion, respect, sincerity, piety, sensitivity, and service to humanity. Gülen is considered among the most prominent intellectuals in modern Turkey and around the globe, placing first on a list of the top 100 living public intellectuals in a survey organized by the British magazine Prospect and Foreign Policy in July 2008. With over 500,000 people casting their votes in the survey, the majority chose Gülen, with over 60 books printed in 40 different languages. It is easy to understand why Gülen was chosen. Gülen is a well-respected contemporary thinker, a democratic figure, and a social innovator who appeals to large numbers of people. According to Professor Barton from Australia, Gülen can be truly said to be preaching by example, because he is on the front lines of social activism, and in regard to the greater good, his example is one that speaks loudly, not just to the Muslim world, but also to the rest. A few years ago, Gülen was awarded an honorary doctorate of education by Leeds Metropolitan University for his contribution to education, peacemaking, and intercultural dialogue. According to Özcan Keleş, executive director of the London-based Dialogue Society, who accepted the degree on his behalf, on Gülen's behalf, he says the aim of Gülen's lifelong work and that of the movement he inspires is to contribute toward the development of a more civil society which is committed to the well-being of others. Despite the high regard millions hold for him, Gülen only considers himself to be one of the volunteers of the civil society movement he helped to generate and denies being its leader. So you can understand why he is bothered by the naming as Gülen movement. Out of respect to all the volunteers all around the world, Gülen spends most of his time reading, writing, editing, worshiping, and receiving medical care, and this is the case for years. I spent about 10 years in US, and I had several chances to visit him in his place where he resides now, and so I can say this is a first-hand observation. Living to let others live is the core principle of his understanding of service. Living to let others live. There's an upcoming book, I think you can call his most recent book, maybe already released nowadays. The title of that book is, our guests from Turkey might have heard of that book, Yaşatma İdeali, the ideal of letting others live. His emphasis on dialogue, empathic acceptance, and peaceful coexistence can best be reflected in a comparison with Rumi, one of his sources of inspiration. While Rumi speaks of whirling, saying, "Come, come, whoever you are," ours is not the caravan of despair. Gülen embraces walking, saying that, "I am coming, whoever you are." Is not ours the journey of hope? That is the difference. Instead of "Come, come, whoever you are," "I'll come to you, whoever you are," is the difference, but inspiration comes from Rumi. As a preacher emeritus, Gülen gave his most celebrated series of sermons between 1988 and 1991 in the biggest mosques in Turkey, packed with people in the early hours of the morning. Even though I'm a young person, but I have had, I was lucky enough to attend several of those very crowded sermons. Due to health concerns, he retired from preaching but continued small conversation circles in his residence that often consisted of answering questions from members of the audience. Starting in 1994, Gülen pioneered a rejuvenation of the interfaith and intercultural dialogue spirit in the Turkish Muslim tradition, forgotten amidst the troublesome years of the early 20th century. Gülen was chosen as the honorary president for a series of gatherings organized by the Foundation of Journalists and Writers that involved leaders of religious minorities in Turkey, such as the Greek Orthodox Patriarch, the Armenian Orthodox Patriarch, the Chief Rabbi of Turkey, the Vatican's representative to Turkey, and others. Another platform, the Abant platform. Abant platform is one of 6-7 platforms under the umbrella of the Foundation of Journalists and Writers. That platform brought together leading intellectuals from all corners of the political spectrum, including leftists, atheists, nationalists, religious conservatives, and liberals, offering for the first time in recent Turkish history a place where such figures could freely debate about the common concerns of all citizens and societies pressing social problems. The growing authority, of course, the walk was not like walking in a rose garden. The growing authority of Fethullah Gülen in Turkey and the significance, size, and influence of the social movement Gülen helped to build threatened some in the country who benefited from a closed society with government-favored enterprises, a monopoly on the intellectual life, an isolationist approach to foreign affairs. Those in privileged positions accused him of having long-term political ambitions and eventually persuaded an ultra-nationalist prosecutor to bring charges against him. While these charges were found to be baseless and eventually dismissed, the case caused a setback in the interfaith and intercultural dialogue that Gülen helped to rekindle. If I'm mistaken, it was in that context he wrote a piece titled A Dream That Is Cracked. Dream was that peaceful coexistence and dialogue, building bridges, and that was cracked in that context. Upon the recommendation of his doctors, Gülen moved to the US to stay away from the politically charged atmosphere of 1997 and to receive medical care for his diabetes, cardiovascular disease, and a host of other health problems. He currently lives at a retreat facility in Pennsylvania, together with a group of students, scholars, and a few visitors, who consider it a good day in terms of his health if he is able to have a half-hour conversation answering their questions. There are some days he's a lot better than this, but most of the time you can say, or we can say, this is the case in terms of his health. He can now return to Turkey with no legal obstacles to prevent him from doing so, but mindful that his return to Turkey may be taken advantage of by some circles to rally support for themselves, and also due to health reasons, he has decided not to return home, at least so far. Let me shift to the Gülen movement here. I'm trying to use my time wisely because I will be very concerned about taking out of Dr. Michel's time. The Fethullah Gülen movement, if we borrow the same name, is a faith-inspired civil society movement named after Fethullah Gülen, and this name is for ease of reference, of course. Its participants, however, often call it Hizmet, or the volunteer services. Hizmet, as a word, means service in English. As far as Gülen is concerned, he prefers to refer to it as the movement of humans united or gathered around high human values. But there is no way to use this long, it is not a name, it is a description. So there is no way to use this again and again. But he would like to define the movement as such. Let me read that part again. The movement of humans united or gathered around high human values. The movement originated in Turkey and conducts activities in 130 countries. Its primary work is to promote tolerance. When I say tolerance, I'm concerned because tolerance has a connotation that is not meant by the original word. The original word is hoşgörü, actually. Tolerance sometimes has a negative connotation, even though it is in general a positive word, but it has a connotation like, I don't like you, but I have to bear with you. I have to tolerate you. That connotation is not meant by the original word hoşgörü. So here, with that note, we can take tolerance. Its primary work is to promote tolerance and interfaith and intercultural collaboration through secular educational institutions. The exact number of supporters of the Gülen movement is not known, as there is no membership system. There are estimates. I can share those estimates with you. But personally, I